Okay, thanks for watching this. I was going to do a quick review of why a blockchain application would be great for securing some of the holes we have in our security safety net, and also some of our current approach, and we'll discuss some different approaches to this. Okay, so a couple reasons I'm doing it. One is our current system, as we'll see, doesn't really work. But the second is the more an idea gets out there, it tends, once it reaches a certain mass, it tends to really get out there. So, in other words, this is called the 100th monkey effect, which is you take a geographically isolated species of monkey in a tropical chain of islands that are geographically separated, but one day a monkey coming back from getting his shrimp washed up on the beach after tide went out, he dropped it from his mouth into a tidal pool, and he noticed that that was a much better way to get the sand off it than the way he was using. Thereafter, usually one or two monkeys saw him doing that every day, and so they started using the tidal pools to wash their food as well. So, every day on average there'll be probably one more monkey doing it, and it'll just progress like that at a 45-degree slope until it gets to a certain point. And for whatever reason, once it hits the 100th monkey, all of a sudden all the monkeys on all the islands start doing it. So that's the idea of getting the concept out there, and so that's the other reason I'm doing it. Our current system doesn't work, and I could change this every week, but like a recent example is, a simplified example is the Florida shooter, Nick Cruz, and it had been widely reported that he'd been turned in by his family, by his friends, by people that just ran into him or whatever, to authorities saying, hey, he's a threat, he's going to go crazy. And widely reported over 50 times. But and that includes, local police, sheriff, FBI, DHS, all those agencies combined. So my question for you is, should he, after, being turned into local authorities that much, should there be a restriction on him buying ammo, for example? And I think the answer is yes. And I think also that our current approach isn't even close to handling this risk. But a national risk assessment database is the answer, and deploying it from the ground up with blockchain would do a great deal to ensure its integrity. And one problem with the way we're currently doing it is we're doing universal screening or mass data collection, and we should be doing targeted screening. And the reason here for this is you're trying to mitigate a risk. So you always want to do it in the most efficient manner possible. I mean, that's always, the financial impact of risk is always in the equation. So you have to deploy it as efficiently as possible. And efficient deployment means you can't randomize or mass surveil or do mass data collection or universal screenings. Because you need to, security deployment is most successful if targeted. And an early pioneer for this was probably, the most famous guy in cybersecurity, Bruce Schneier. And even before 9/11, believe it or not, he and the passage of the Patriot Act, he was on record as saying, pointing out the dangers of mass data collection. And of course, after 9/11, since he'd already been an advocate for this, it kind of put him in the catbird seat. So he started, publishing books and things. And he probably is has the most famous cryptography book, textbook. And he also has his cryptogram, which is his email newsletter, and then his current book, Data and Goliath. He talks about this idea too. He's also coined the term security theater, so he's a pretty well-known guy, and he has a lot of go back into his archives and stuff. He has a lot of writing on this topic, which we can't cover in nearly the depth he does. But keeping the idea that we need to keep track of the people we need to keep track of, we need a database that's a risk assessment database to address these current threats that are getting through our security screening. So here's a flowchart of how it would work. You start with a team of experts who would develop risk profile factors, and that could be, maybe taking drugs, or, there are certain psychotropic drugs, for instance, that seem really, really correlated. And again, we're not judging anyone or anything. In fact, we can't even identify who this person is. So, we'll talk about that in a second. But so these profiles go into a database, which lead to a national risk score, sort of like a credit score, but unlike credit score, you can easily obtain it and very difficult to change it, and you can't quickly change it. This you can. If there's something on your national risk score that shouldn't be there, you can immediately appeal it. And actually blockchain facilitates that. And this is linked not to an identity or personally identifiable information, but to a biometrically identified card. So the risk profile is linked to a biometric. Now, we'll talk about why blockchain has these characteristics, but before we do, we'll review a little bit about it. But blockchain would be perfect for this, because it would keep this risk database from being hacked. It would ensure the integrity of the edits. It would be impossible for anyone to edit it unless they had permissions to do so. And we'll talk about why this is. But first, let's talk about the basics.